Welcome back to our channel. Today, we are not discussing baseless rumors or idle gossip. We are talking about the precise moment Prince Harry, the exiled son of the British monarchy, realized that his marriage might just be the greatest orchestrated performance in modern history. Harry and Meghan, in absolute panic after a shocking revelation, exposed her true plan for the crown. It did not start with a loud explosion. It began in the deathly silence of the $14 million Montecito mansion on a bleak Tuesday night in late January. While Meghan Markle was away, attending a clandestine meeting in Los Angeles, where she was reportedly renegotiating media contracts that were teetering on the edge of collapse, Harry was home alone. He wandered the vast, frigid corridors of the house he once called a sanctuary of freedom, but which now increasingly felt like a gilded cage. According to sources close to a former Sussex security detail, Harry inadvertently walked into Meghan's private study, a space usually considered off-limits. He was searching for a legal file regarding his security lawsuit in the UK, but instead, what he found changed everything. Buried deep in the bottom drawer of the mahogany desk, carefully concealed beneath stacks of fashion magazines, was a diary bound in crimson leather. It wasn't a notebook for charity work. It looked much older, with pages that had yellowed with time. Driven by curiosity, Harry opened it. And right there, on the very first page, his world imploded. Meghan's handwriting, neat, stylized, and painfully familiar, filled the page. But the content was not filled with words of love or life reflections. These were cold, sharp bullet points, dated back to 2014, 2 full years before they officially met. The title of the first entry was not diary. It was written simply, The Crown Project. Harry felt his chest tighten. He turned the pages, and every entry felt like a knife stabbing directly into the heart of the man who had abandoned his family and country to protect this woman. The diary did not record emotions. It recorded strategy. Target, the spare. Weakness, trauma over mother's death. Desire for protection, resentment towards the system. Harry froze. He read that line 3 times. Weakness. She didn't see him as a man needing love. She saw him as a target with psychological vulnerabilities ready to be exploited. The notes in the margins were chillingly detailed. Must play the role of the independent yet vulnerable woman to trigger H's hero instinct. A cold shiver ran down Harry's spine. He flashed back to their early days of dating, the way Meghan always feigned innocence, claiming she knew nothing about the royal family, nothing about who Harry was. I didn't know much about him. I just asked, is he kind? That famous line from their engagement interview now echoed in Harry's mind as a brazen lie, because in this diary, she had meticulously analyzed the power structure of Buckingham Palace since 2015. She knew everything. She knew who held the power, who was a threat, and most importantly, how to separate Harry from William. Another page, marked in red ink, bore the title, Phase 2, Isolation. Beneath it was a list of Harry's closest friends from Eton and the army, with ruthless notes beside their names. Too influential, needs removal, potential threat. Harry realized that every single person on that list had slowly vanished from his life over the last 5 years, following the exact sequence the diary had laid out. This wasn't love. This was a military campaign camouflaged by kisses and hand-holding in front of the cameras. Harry collapsed onto the cold floor of the Montecito estate, his hands trembling as he clutched the diary. He hadn't just discovered that his wife was calculating. He had just discovered that his entire life for the past 6 years was a scripted reality, and he was merely a supporting actor in Meghan Markle's grand production to seize global spotlight. But the most terrifying part was yet to come. In the final pages, Harry saw a new plan, a scheme more ruthless than anything he could have imagined, directly involving King Charles and Prince William. A plan titled The Endgame. What did Harry see in that final section that made him break down in absolute panic? And what will Meghan do when she discovers that her secret diary is now in the hands of the husband she thought she had completely controlled? Harry sat frozen in the dim light of the study, the leather-bound diary heavy in his hands. He wanted to close it, to throw it into the fireplace and watch the ink burn, but he couldn't. A morbid compulsion forced him to turn the page. What he found next wasn't just a strategy for isolation. It was a masterclass in psychological manipulation titled The Victimhood Narrative, 2018 to 2020. The dates were meticulous. Harry felt a wave of nausea as he traced his finger over an entry dated 3 months before their wedding. It read, "The Wedding Tears Strategy. Objective: to look overwhelmed by the racist British press. Note: use the flower girl dress fitting incident to establish Kate as the aggressor. H must believe I am the one being bullied." Harry gasped. The flower girl dress incident. He remembered finding Meghan sobbing on the floor that day. He remembered the fierce protectiveness that had surged through him, the rage he felt towards his sister-in-law, Kate. He had gone to war with his own family over those tears. But here, in black and blue ink, it was written as a pre-planned scene. Establish Kate as the aggressor. It wasn't a breakdown, it was a rehearsal. He flipped forward to 2019. The handwriting became more jagged, more urgent. There was a section dedicated entirely to their son, Archie. The heading was chilling: The Leverage of Heritage. The notes detailed how to use conversations about the baby's skin color, conversations that Harry recalled as clumsy inquiries from elderly relatives, and weaponize them into a global race scandal. Wait for the right moment, Meghan had written. Oprah. The platform must be American. The audience must be global. H will be the witness. I will be the martyr. Harry's hands were shaking so violently he nearly dropped the book. The Oprah interview. The event that had effectively nuked his relationship with his father and brother. He had believed they were speaking their truth, unburdening themselves after years of silence. But the diary revealed that the key soundbites, concerns, and conversations about how dark his skin might be were drafted in bullet points years before they sat in that garden. Meghan hadn't just reacted to racism. She had curated it as a brand asset. I didn't want to be alive anymore. The sentence that had broken Harry's heart during the interview, the confession that had made him vow to get her out of the UK at any cost. It was there, too, written on a page dated late 2018, underlined twice. Beside it, a note in the margin. The exit card. If the palace doesn't yield to demands for half in, half out, play the mental health card. H cannot survive losing another woman he loves. Remind him of Diana. Remind him of Diana. The words blurred through Harry's tears. She knew. She knew exactly which button to press. She knew that his mother's death was an open wound that had never healed, and she had deliberately poked a finger into it to manipulate him into leaving his home. She hadn't saved him from the institution. She had used his trauma as the engine to drive their escape to Hollywood. Harry looked up, his eyes red and wild. The silence of the mansion was suddenly deafening. He realized he wasn't just living with his wife. He was living with a brilliant, cold-blooded director who had cast him as the tragic hero in her reality show. But as he reached the middle of the diary, the tone shifted. The victimhood phase was over. The new section was titled The Return, and the first name on the list of targets wasn't William or Charles. It was someone Harry never expected, someone whose destruction was apparently the final key to Meghan's ultimate power. Who was the next target in Meghan's secret plan? And what endgame required this person's total annihilation? The name scrawled across the top of page 112 wasn't a shock because it was unknown. It was a shock because of the sheer venom contained in the analysis beneath it. The header read, The Obstacle, Catherine. Harry felt his stomach drop. For years, he had convinced himself, or been convinced, that his sister-in-law, the Princess of Wales, was the one who had changed. He had believed the narrative Meghan whispered during late-night pillow talks, that Kate was cold, that she was unwelcoming, that she was jealous of Meghan's star power. In his memoir, Spare, Harry had painted Kate as rigid and formal, a woman trapped by the institution who couldn't handle Meghan's free spirit. But the diary told a horrifyingly different story. Under a section dated November 2017, mere weeks after their engagement announcement, Meghan had written, Problem. H loves her like a sister. She is the mother figure he relies on. Solution. Sever the bond. Reframe her concern as judgment. Make H believe she looks down on him. Harry's breath hitched. He remembered the specific conversation where William had asked him to slow down with Meghan. Harry had taken offense, flying into a rage. But looking at the diary, he saw a note from the same week. If W or K express caution, label it as classism, racism. Isolate H from their advice. Make him choose the institution, them, or love May. She hadn't just misunderstood his family. She had engineered a conflict to force him to choose sides. The bridesmaid dress incident, the infamous moment that reportedly left Meghan in tears, was detailed here not as a moment of emotional distress, but as a tactical victory. Kate is hormonal and weak post-birth, the entry read. Push the issue on the tights. If she snaps, cry. Run to H. He will see her as the bully. Narrative secured. Harry put a hand over his mouth, suppressing a sob. He had berated his brother. He had publicly shamed Kate in his book for making his wife cry. He had allowed the world to tear Catherine apart, believing he was defending his vulnerable bride. But the vulnerability was an act. The tears were a weapon. He had destroyed his relationship with the woman who had been the sister he never had, all because he was following a script written by a woman who viewed Catherine not as family, but as a market competitor. But the obsession with Catherine went deeper than just interpersonal conflict. The diary revealed a commercial motive. There were comparison charts, literal columns comparing Kate's brand value versus Meghan's potential brand value. Meghan had tracked Catherine's clothing sales, her patronage engagement numbers, and her approval ratings. A note circled in aggressive black ink read, "The Diana Void. The public craves a people's princess. Kate is too stiff to fill it. I can take that space. But first, we must dismantle the hierarchy. If I cannot be Queen of England, I will be Queen of the Commonwealth." Harry stared at the page. Queen of the Commonwealth. It was delusional. It was narcissistic. But it explained everything. The tours that looked like royal visits, the demands for VIP security, the insistence on titles. She wasn't trying to leave the monarchy to live a quiet life. She was trying to set up a rival court. She wanted the adoration of Diana without the duty of the crown. And Catherine was simply the mirror Meghan couldn't stand to look into. As Harry turned the page, the personal vendettas ended, and the cold, hard numbers began. The next section was no longer about feelings or fame. It was about finance. And what Harry saw next made his blood run cold. It wasn't just about making money. It was about stealing it. What financial secret was hiding in the Arcuel section of the diary? And how did it involve Harry's own inheritance? Harry wiped the tears from his eyes, but the horror was far from over. The diary's tone shifted abruptly from emotional manipulation to cold, hard, forensic accounting. The heading on page 145 didn't mince words. The Arcuel Engine, funding the freedom. For years, Harry had defended their foundation against critics who called it a scam. He had stood on stages in New York and Dusseldorf, preaching about equity and compassion, believing that every dollar raised was going to change the world. But the diagram in front of him told a different story. It was a flowchart that showed money moving not to starving children or mental health charities, but into a complex web of LLCs registered in Delaware, a state famous for its corporate secrecy. Beside the chart, Meghan had written a manifesto that sounded more like a Ponzi scheme than a non-profit mission. The 5% rule. Legally, we only need to donate 5% of assets to maintain tax-exempt status. The remaining 95% is operational costs, travel, wardrobe, security, and PR. Arcuel is not the goal. It is the wallet. Harry felt a wave of physical sickness. The private jets he thought were paid for by generous friends, the designer gowns Meghan wore to visit impoverished schools. They weren't gifts. They were being billed to the foundation as necessary branding expenses. She had turned charity into a personal expense account. But the knife twisted deeper when Harry saw his own name, or rather, his mother's name. Under a subheading titled Liquidity Strategy 2020 to 2023, there was a bullet point that stopped his heart. Burn rate. Use H's inheritance from Diana first. Keep the Sussex brand money in separate holdings under Doria's control for safety. H must feel financial pressure to agree to the Netflix, Spotify deals. Harry slammed his fist onto the desk. Use Diana's inheritance first. She had drained the money his mother had left him, the money that was supposed to be his safety net, the last tangible piece of Diana he had left. And she had done it on purpose. She had deliberately exhausted his personal funds to make him desperate, to force him into the humiliating reality TV deals that had turned him into a laughingstock. He remembered the panic he felt when Charles cut him off financially. He remembered telling Oprah, "I have what my mum left me." He had felt proud of that. But Meghan had seen that money not as a legacy, but as seed capital for her own ambitions. And now, it was gone. The entry dated January 2024 was even more alarming. H is now financially dependent. The power balance has shifted. He cannot leave because he cannot afford to. Phase 3 complete. Harry stared at the wall, breathing heavily. He was trapped. He wasn't just a husband, he was a hostage. He had no home in the UK, no relationship with his family, and now, he realized, he had no money of his own. He was entirely reliant on the brand that Meghan controlled, but as he turned to the final tab of the diary, a tab marked with a single black X, he realized that money was the least of his problems. The financial exploitation was just the fuel. The weapon was something else entirely. A weapon aimed directly at the heart of the British monarchy, specifically at King Charles III. What was the ultimate leverage Meghan had been saving for the end? And why did the next page contain a photocopy of a medical document that Harry had never seen before? Harry stared at the document clipped into the back of the diary. It wasn't a medical record for himself or his children. It was a photocopy of a private, handwritten letter from his father, King Charles III. Harry recognized the handwriting immediately, the distinctive spider scrawl of the king. This was one of the letters Charles had sent to Meghan shortly after the Oprah interview, attempting to bridge the divide, expressing his deep sorrow over the skin color misunderstanding. Harry remembered Meghan reading it to him, tears streaming down her face, claiming she was touched by his effort. But the note sticky-taped to the photocopy told a different story. In sharp red marker, Meghan had written, "The nuclear option, do not destroy." Beneath it, a strategic analysis outlined exactly how to weaponize this private correspondence. If the palace cuts funding or removes titles, leak excerpts to Omid Scobie. Context: Charles is the royal racist. Result: global cancellation of the coronation. Harry felt the blood drain from his face. She hadn't kept the letter for sentiment. She had kept it as insurance, as blackmail. He turned the page to find a timeline titled Operation Checkmate. It was a schedule of calculated leaks designed to destabilize his father's reign. Step 1. The memoir, Spare. Note: ensure H attacks Camilla. This ensures C will never forgive him. Bridge burned equals H is mine forever. Step 2. The documentary. Note: mock the curtsy. Show the world the monarchy is a joke. Step 3. The abdication narrative. Note: plant stories about C's health and transitional monarchy. Promote W as trapped and H as free. Goal: make the institution look like a sinking ship. Harry dropped the diary on the desk as if it were burning his skin. He had attacked Camilla in Spare because he thought he was defending his mother's memory. He hadn't realized he was executing a military tactic drafted by his wife to ensure he could never return to his family. She wanted the bridge burned. She needed him isolated, because a reconciled Harry was a Harry who didn't need her. The realization hit him with the force of a physical blow. He wasn't the dragon slayer protecting his wife. He was the dragon's puppet. He had destroyed his father's reputation, mocked his grandmother's legacy, and alienated his brother, all while following a script written in this crimson book. He looked at the date of the final entry in this section. It was dated just 2 weeks ago. The money is running low. The Hollywood deals are drying up. It is time for the final pivot. The divorce narrative. Harry froze. Divorce? He read the bullet points, his heart pounding against his ribs. H is becoming a liability. He is depressed, unmarketable, and clingy. Narrative shift. I am the strong mother trying to save my children from his genetic pain and drug use. H is the new Charles, I am the new Diana. She was planning to discard him. She was going to do to him exactly what she had done to her father, Thomas Markle. She was going to paint him as mentally unstable, an addict, a failure, and take the children to build her own solo empire. Suddenly, the silence of the house was shattered. The sound of tires crunching on gravel, the heavy thud of a car door slamming, and then the distinct beep of the security alarm being disarmed. Harry looked at the clock. It was too early. She wasn't supposed to be back from LA until tomorrow. He heard the click of high heels echoing on the marble floor of the foyer. Click, 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 getting closer. Harry stood up, clutching the diary to his chest. He had the evidence. He knew the truth. But he was trapped in the house with the woman who had orchestrated his entire destruction. The door handle to the study turned slowly. The mahogany door creaked open, slicing through the heavy tension in the room. Harry stood frozen, clutching the crimson diary to his chest like a shield. He expected to see a ghost. He expected to see a monster. But what he saw was worse. Meghan stood in the doorway, framed by the hallway light. She looked impeccable. She was wearing a crisp white shirt and beige trousers, her hair pulled back in that severe, perfect bun. She didn't look like a woman caught in a lie. She looked like a CEO walking into a boardroom to fire an incompetent employee. Her eyes drifted down to the red leather book in Harry's hands. Then, slowly, they moved up to meet his tear-stained face. There was no panic, no gasp of horror, no frantic attempt to snatch it away. Instead, a slow, chilling smile spread across her lips. It wasn't the warm, dazzling smile she flashed on red carpets. It was the cold, predatory smile of a predator who realizes the prey has finally wandered into the trap. "I see you've been busy," she said. Her voice was terrifyingly calm. Harry's voice shook as he held up the diary. "What is this, Meg? The Crown Project? Targeting the spare? The divorce narrative? Was any of it real? Did you ever love me? Or was I just a stepping stone?" He expected her to deny it. He expected her to gaslight him, to claim it was a creative writing exercise, or that he was misunderstanding her notes. That was her usual tactic. But in this room, with the evidence stripped bare, Meghan dropped the act entirely. She walked into the room and closed the door behind her with a soft, definitive click. She placed her Chanel bag on the desk, right next to the damning flowcharts of Archewell's finances. "Grow up, Harry," she said, her tone dripping with condescension. "Do you think love conquers empires? Do you think we defeated the British press with feelings? I did this for us. You were a broken man-child when I found you, trapped in a palace, angry at Daddy, but too weak to leave. I gave you a script because you didn't have a voice. You planned to destroy my family," Harry screamed, finding his voice. "You plan to destroy me. It says right here, the divorce narrative. You're planning to leave me and take the kids." Meghan didn't flinch. She stepped closer to him, invading his personal space. The scent of her expensive perfume, once comforting, now smelled suffocating. "I plan for contingencies, Harry," she whispered. "And look at you. Look at you right now. Hysterical, red-faced, unstable. You're proving my point. If we went to court tomorrow, who do you think the judge would believe? The strong, articulate mother who saved her children from a toxic environment? Or the drug-using prince who wrote a book about his frozen todger and hallucinogenic mushrooms? Harry stumbled back. It was a checkmate. She had encouraged him to put all those humiliating details in spare. She had told him it was brave and authentic. Now, he realized it was a trap. She had helped him destroy his own credibility, so that if he ever fought back, no one would believe him. "You set me up," Harry whispered, the realization crushing him. "I insured myself," she corrected. She reached out and plucked the diary from his limp hands. He didn't have the strength to fight her. "This," she said, tapping the cover, "is not a betrayal. It's the only reason you're relevant. Without my plan, you're just the spare. With my plan, you are a revolutionary." She walked over to the safe behind the painting, the safe Harry didn't know the combination to, and punched in a code. As the heavy steel door swung open, Harry saw something inside that made his blood freeze. It wasn't money. It wasn't jewelry. It was a stack of recording devices. Small, black digital voice recorders, dozens of them. And labeled on each one were dates and names. The Sandringham Summit, argument with William, phone call with Charles. Meghan hadn't just written a diary. She had been recording them. She had been recording everyone. You thought the diary was the secret? Meghan laughed, a sound devoid of humor. Harry, darling, the diary is just the outline. This, she gestured to the safe, is the weapon. But before Harry could process the sheer scale of the surveillance operation his wife had run on his own family, Meghan turned to him with a look of mock pity. But we have a bigger problem now, H. I didn't come back early because I missed you. I came back because I received a call. Someone else knows about the money missing from the foundation, and they aren't going to be as easy to manipulate as you. Who had called Meghan? And what outside force was about to crash into their Montecito fortress, threatening to expose a crime that went far beyond emotional manipulation? Who called? Harry asked, his voice barely a whisper. The room felt suddenly smaller, the air thin and suffocating. Meghan didn't answer immediately. She walked over to the oversized window overlooking the manicured grounds of their estate grounds that cost $20,000 a month to maintain. She stared out into the darkness, her reflection in the glass looking like a specter. It was Rick, she said, referring to their high-powered attorney in Los Angeles. The IRS has flagged the transfer, specifically the withdrawal of the Diana Fund through Archewell's operational account. Harry felt the floor tilt beneath him. But that was my money, my inheritance. You said we were just parking it there for tax efficiency. Meghan turned around, her face devoid of sympathy. We were, but legally, Harry, once you deposit personal funds into a 501c3 charity and then withdraw them for personal use like paying for this house, the security, my wardrobe, it's no longer your money. It's called private inurement. In federal court, they call it embezzlement. Harry's knees gave way. He sank into the leather armchair, the same chair where he had sat to record his audiobook, telling the world how trapped he felt in the palace. He realized now that the palace wasn't a trap. It was a fortress, and he had walked out of it straight into a federal crime scene. You told me it was legal, Harry stammered. You said your business managers handled it, and you signed the authorization, Meghan countered, sliding a piece of paper across the desk. Harry looked down. It was a transfer document dated 3 years ago. There, at the bottom, in his own handwriting, was his signature. Next to it was a clause he hadn't bothered to read at the time, buried in legal jargon, authorizing the funds to be classified as foundation assets. You set me up, Harry whispered, the horror rising in his throat like bile. You made me sign my own death warrant. I made you a partner, Meghan corrected, her voice sharp. If I go down, Harry, the king's son goes down for charity fraud. Can you imagine the headlines? Prince Harry, the thief. You think the British press hated you before? Wait until they find out you stole from a charity meant to help orphans. She walked back to the safe, picked up one of the digital recorders, and pressed play. Harry's own voice filled the room, sounding younger, naiver. Audio recording. I don't care how we move the money, Meg. Just get it done so we can leave. I trust you. Meghan clicked stop. The silence that followed was deafening. I have hours of this, she said softly. You agreeing to the transfers. You complaining about your father. You mocking the Queen. If I release these tapes, you won't just be a criminal. You will be a pariah. No country will take you. No family will welcome you back. Harry looked at his wife, the mother of his children, and saw a stranger. The diary had been the blueprint, but this was the execution. She had built a cage so intricate, so legally binding, that he couldn't leave without destroying himself. What do you want? Harry asked, defeated. If the IRS is coming, we're both finished. Meghan's eyes gleamed. Not necessarily. There is one way out. One way to make the investigation disappear and refill our bank accounts in a single night. She pointed to the phone on the desk. You are going to make a call, not to a lawyer, to your father. Harry shook his head. No, I haven't spoken to him since the diagnosis. He won't take my call. He will, Meghan said. When you tell him what we have, you are going to offer him a deal, Harry. The end game I wrote about in the diary? It starts now. What deal? Harry asked, dreading the answer. Meghan leaned in, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. We trade the tapes. We give him the recordings of you and me, and the recordings I made of him during the Sandringham summit, the ones where he talks about Camilla's fears. We trade silence for immunity, and a settlement. You want me to blackmail the king? I want you to save your family, she hissed. Because if you don't make that call, I will release the race tape, the one I recorded during the conversation about Archie's skin color. I have it, Harry. And if that leaks, the monarchy falls. Harry stared at her. The race tape. She had recorded it. The conversation that had started it all. She had held on to it for years, waiting for this exact moment of desperation. Harry reached for the phone, his hand trembling uncontrollably. He had no choice, but as he dialed the number for Buckingham Palace, a thought occurred to him. A tiny, desperate spark of rebellion. What if he didn't call the king? What if he called the one person Meghan had underestimated in her diary? The one person who had been the obstacle all along. Meghan left the room to pour herself a glass of Tignerello wine, confident that her broken husband would do exactly as he was told. She had given him an ultimatum: blackmail the king or go to prison. In her mind, the game was won. But she had made one fatal calculation error. She had underestimated the residual bond of blood. Harry stared at the phone. His thumb hovered over his father's contact. But then, his eyes drifted to a name saved under a pseudonym he hadn't used since 2019. C. Wales. With trembling fingers, he pressed the call button. 1 ring, 2 rings. He expected it to go to voicemail. Why would she answer? After the attacks in Spare? After the accusations of racism? After everything? Click. Harry? The voice was soft, steady, and heartbreakingly familiar. It was Catherine. Not the cold villain Meghan had described in her diary, but the woman who used to cook him roast chicken in Nottingham Cottage. Kate, Harry choked out, tears streaming down his face. I found it. The diary. You were right. You were right about everything. There was a heavy silence on the line. Then, Catherine spoke, her voice filled not with triumph, but with profound sadness. We knew, Harry. William tried to tell you. The Crown Project. MI6 flagged a dossier on her ambitions 6 months before the wedding. We tried to protect you, but you thought we were the enemy. Harry squeezed his eyes shut. She has tapes, Kate. She recorded everyone. Sandringham, the Queen, Pa. She's going to release them if I don't blackmail Pa into stopping the IRS investigation. The IRS investigation? Catherine's tone shifted. It became sharper, more authoritative, the voice of a future queen. Harry, listen to me very carefully. Meghan thinks the IRS investigation is an accident? She thinks it's bad luck? What do you mean? The palace didn't stop the investigation, Harry, Catherine said, her voice dropping to a whisper. We started it. Harry froze. The room spun. What? Did you really think the institution would let her drain your mother's inheritance and abuse charitable status without consequence? Catherine continued. The men in gray suits you hate so much? They've been tracking the wire transfers for 2 years. We have the bank records, Harry. We have the evidence of the shell companies in Delaware. We were waiting for the right moment to sever the link. She's going to take me down with her, Harry stammered. I signed the papers. No, Catherine said firmly. You are the king's son. There is a way back, but you have to make a choice. Right now, you can be her shield, or you can be a witness. If you stay in that house tonight, we cannot help you. If you leave, a car is already waiting. A car? We never stopped watching over you, H. There is a diplomatic protection team 2 miles from Montecito. Walk out the door. Leave the diary. Leave the tapes. Just save yourself. Harry's heart hammered against his ribs. It was the ultimate test. Meghan offered him survival through blackmail. Catherine offered him redemption through surrender. Suddenly, the study door flew open. Meghan stood there, the wine glass shattering on the floor as it slipped from her hand. She didn't need to ask who he was talking to. She saw the look on his face, the look of a man waking up from a long, dark coma. "Who are you talking to?" she screamed, her composure finally cracking. She lunged for the phone. "Give me that!" Harry scrambled back, holding the phone to his ear. "I'm coming home, Kate," he whispered, and then he hung up. The silence that followed was more violent than any scream. Meghan stared at him, her chest heaving. The mask was gone. The victim was gone. Standing before him was pure, unadulterated rage. "You idiot!" she hissed, her voice transforming into a guttural growl. "You think they want you? You're the traitor. I made you a star. Without me, you are nothing." She reached into her pocket and pulled out something Harry hadn't seen earlier. It wasn't a weapon, it was a phone, and her thumb was hovering over the post button on X, formerly Twitter. "You leave this house," she threatened, her eyes wide and manic, and I hit send. The race tape goes live in 30 seconds. I burn the entire monarchy to the ground. Harry looked at the door, then at his wife. It was the standoff of the century. The air in the room was electric, crackling with the kind of tension that precedes a gunshot. Meghan's thumb hovered millimeters above the screen, her eyes wide with a manic desperation. "One step," she breathed, her voice shaking with adrenaline. "One step towards that door, Harry, and the world burns. I will destroy your father. I will destroy William. And I will make sure history remembers you as the man who let it happen." Harry looked at the woman he had sacrificed everything for. For years, he had lived in fear of her threats, fear of her leaving, fear of her leaks, fear of her tears. But as he looked at her now, holding a smartphone like a detonator, the fear evaporated. It was replaced by a cold, clarifying resolve. He remembered a specific entry in the diary he had read just minutes ago. Page 88, the race tape. Note: the audio is weak. I have to guide the conversation. If released, I must edit out my prompts to make the question seem unsolicited. She was bluffing, or at least, the weapon wasn't as powerful as she claimed. "Do it," Harry said softly. Meghan blinked, stunned. "What?" "Post it," Harry said, his voice rising, stronger than it had been in years. "But make sure you post the unedited version, Meg. The one where you ask the leading questions. The one where you try to trap a 75-year-old man into saying something he didn't mean." Meghan's face twisted in confusion. She hadn't expected him to call her bluff. She hadn't expected him to know the tape was doctored. "You think I won't?" she screamed. "I think you know that if you press that button," Harry said, stepping closer, "you don't just destroy the monarchy, you destroy your victimhood. You prove to the world that you were recording us all along. You prove you are exactly what they say you are." For a split second, Meghan hesitated. Her eyes flickered to the screen, calculating the risk. That split second was all Harry needed. He didn't lunge for the phone. He lunged for the door, clutching the crimson diary tightly against his chest, the only evidence that could exonerate him. He turned and sprinted into the hallway. "Security!" Meghan shrieked, her voice echoing off the marble walls. "Stop him! He's stealing my property! Tackle him!" Harry heard the heavy footsteps of the private security team, men he paid, men he thought were loyal, pounding down the corridor from the kitchen. He was 40 years old, a combat veteran, running through his own house like a fugitive. "Socrates is moving!" one guard yelled into his radio. "Secure the perimeter!" Harry reached the heavy oak front doors. His hands fumbled with the locks. Behind him, he could hear Meghan's heels clicking furiously on the floor, accompanied by her screams. "Don't let him leave with that book. Break his arm if you have to." His own wife was ordering her guards to assault him. Harry threw the deadbolt and shoved the door open. The cool night air hit his face, smelling of eucalyptus and freedom. He stumbled out onto the driveway, his lungs burning, but the driveway wasn't empty. Blocking the exit were two massive, black Range Rovers with tinted windows. They weren't the usual security SUVs. These vehicles bore diplomatic plates. Meghan's private guards burst out of the house, guns drawn, ready to take Harry down. But they froze instantly. Standing by the lead vehicle were 4 men in suits. They didn't look like Hollywood bodyguards. They stood with the quiet, terrifying discipline of the SAS. One of the men stepped forward. Harry recognized him immediately. It was his old protection officer from Scotland Yard, the man Charles had fired when Harry left for Canada. "Sir," the officer said, his voice cutting through the chaos like a knife. "Your carriage is ready." Meghan appeared in the doorway, breathless and disheveled. She looked at the diplomatic protection team, then at Harry, and finally at the diary in his hands. She realized, with dawning horror, that her jurisdiction ended at her doorstep. "Harry!" she screamed, her voice cracking. "If you get in that car, you never see Archie and Lily again. I will bury you in court. I will tell them you abandoned us." Harry paused. His hand was on the door handle of the Range Rover. He looked back at the sprawling mansion, the prison where his children were sleeping. It tore him apart to leave them, but he knew, with crystal clarity, that he couldn't save them if he was in jail for fraud. He had to save himself first to come back for them later. He looked at Meghan one last time. "You didn't write the ending, Meg," he said. He climbed into the car. The heavy doors slammed shut with a thud that sounded like a bank vault closing. As the convoy sped away into the California night, leaving Meghan screaming on the driveway, Harry looked down at the diary in his lap. He was safe, but as he watched the lights of Montecito fade, he realized the war wasn't over. It had just begun. And back in the house, Meghan Markle wasn't crying. She was walking back to her office. She had one card left to play, a card she had saved for the absolute worst-case scenario. What did Meghan do in the moments after Harry fled? And what was the final, devastating breaking news that would wake the world up the next morning? The dust from the diplomatic convoy had barely settled on the driveway of the Montecito estate when Meghan Markle walked back into her office. She didn't scream, she didn't throw things, she didn't cry. She sat down at the desk where Harry had found the diary just hours ago, and smoothed out her blouse. She took a deep breath, and just like that, the Duchess of Sorrow persona clicked back into place. She picked up the phone. But she didn't call a lawyer. She called a direct line to a contact at a major U.S. media network. "It's me," she whispered, her voice trembling with a perfectly rehearsed fragility. "I need help. He's gone. He took the car. He was manic. He was shouting about conspiracies. I'm terrified for the children." Harry was currently sitting in the back of an armored vehicle, flanked by MI6 agents, clutching the evidence that proved his wife was a fraud. But he had forgotten one crucial rule of the game. The truth takes time. A lie travels instantly. While Harry was flying across the Atlantic, safe but silent, Meghan executed the final phase of her plan, the destruction of the witness. 6 hours later, as the sun rose over London, the world woke up to a breaking news alert that flashed across every smartphone on the planet. The headline wasn't about charity fraud. It wasn't about secret diaries. Breaking: Sussex shock split. Meghan Markle files for emergency sole custody as unstable Prince Harry flees us. The sub-headline was even more devastating. Sources say the Duchess fears a drug-induced relapse after Harry was seen shouting at security and fleeing into the night. Harry landed at RAF Northolt in London, stepping onto British soil for the first time as a truly free man. He had the diary, he had the tapes, he had the full support of the King and the Prince of Wales. He was ready to tell the truth. But as he looked at the TV screen in the VIP terminal, he saw the image Meghan had released to the press. It was a photo of her standing alone in the garden, looking brave and tearful, holding Archie and Lilibet tight. The caption read, "A mother protecting her cubs." Harry dropped his bag. He realized then that the diary wasn't the end of the war. It was just the declaration. He had escaped the house. He had escaped the marriage. But he had left his children behind in the fortress of a woman who had spent 10 years planning exactly how to win this specific moment. Harry looked at the diplomatic protection officer next to him. "Take me to my father," Harry said, his voice hard as steel. "We have a war to win." The screen fades to black with a single quote from the diary appearing in blood-red text. "History is not written by the victors. It is written by the best storytellers." Meghan, 2016. Thank you for watching this exclusive investigation. The Battle of the Sussexes has moved from the tabloids to the courts, and from the courts to the history books. Who do you believe will win the final endgame? Harry with his evidence, or Meghan with her narrative? Let us know in the comments below. And remember, in the game of crowns, the truth is the first casualty.